Section 5.8, Solving Polynomial Equations. Now that we know what polynomials are, how would you solve polynomial equations when the degree of the polynomial exceeds 1? In Chapter 2, remember, we solved linear equations. Those were polynomial equations of degree 1. So, for instance, if we were asked to find x in previous chapters, what we did, we distributed the 2, and then we collect the x's on the left side, and then we isolated x. Lo and behold, we got an answer. But keep in mind, because this was a polynomial of degree 1, we only came up with one answer. In this section, we like to go over solving equations with higher degree than 1, like 2 or 3. How would you solve those? In other words, these are few examples of this section. X times x minus 2 equals 0. 4x squared plus 3x is equal to 0. 3x squared minus 6x minus 7, 2 is equal to 0. 18x cubed is equal to 15x squared plus 12x. So, obviously, I'm going to get more than one answer depending on the highest power of x. If the highest power of x is 2, I'm going to get 2 answers for x. If the highest power of x in the equation is 3, I should expect to get what? 3 answers at the end of the problem. So what are the steps to solve higher degree polynomial equations? Well, put the equation in a standard form. Standard form meaning what? Make sure you have a 0 on one side, everything else on the other side. That's called standard form. This is standard form. So make sure you have a 0 on one side, everything else on the other side, whether you have a third degree or second degree or whatever. Factor out the left side completely. So once you have a 0 on the right side, perhaps the expression on the left side, factor that expression. When you factor that expression, set each factor equal to 0 and find x. And this is called zero factor property. Zero factor property. What does that say? That says if the product of two numbers is 0, the first one or the second one or both had to be 0 in order for the product or multiplication of two numbers to be 0. In other words, which two numbers do you know when you multiply them out, you get 0? Either one of them had to be 0 or both. That's what zero factor property is all about. So with that said, what do you say we try to solve few of these problems? Okay, solve. Incidentally, when the degree of the equation is 2, sometimes we refer these guys to quadratic equation. Quadratic doesn't mean 4, it means 2. Because what? The highest power of x in my equation is 2, so I'm expecting 2 answers, correct? I'm expecting 2 answers. So how do I do that? What was the step now? Put the equation in standard form, meaning subtract 6 from both sides. So now you got x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to what? 0. So that's called put in the equation in what? Standard form. Do you see it? Okay, factor out the left side. Remember, this is a special trinomial, right? Leading coefficient is 1. So two numbers, they multiply to -6, but they add up to -1. I believe that would be -3 and plus 2. Step 3, set each of these guys equal to 0. You know, each of these factors, these are called factors of what? Of x squared minus x minus 6. Set each factor equal to 0. So either x is equal to 3 or is equal to -2. As I promised, we get 2 answers, and we did. So the number of answers depend on the highest power of the x in the equation. Okay, the next one is 3x squared minus 21x. Warning, the last thing you want to do in this problem is what? Divide both sides by 3x. So you get x equals -7, and that is absolutely wrong. Why? Because the highest power of x is 2. You only came up with one answer. Weren't you supposed to come up with two answers? So that's not the right way to do it. Move this guy over. Okay. Make sure the equation shows up in a standard form, which is what? You gotta have a 0 on one side. It doesn't matter which side. Any side will do. Factor what? 3x. That will give you x minus 7. Set each of these guys equal to 0 and get your two answers. First one, if I divide both sides by 3, x is equal to 0. The second one, if I add 7 to both sides, x is equal to what? 7. Once again, highest power of x was 2. That was a quadratic equation. I came up with two answers, so that shortcut doesn't work. This guy is in what? Is in standard form, but before you factor, make sure you look for a common factor. All of these three terms, they have 3 in common. So that would be something like, let's say, what? Oh, I have 24. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So now, factor this out. So that would be like the leading coefficient is 1. So you get x. Two numbers, they multiply to -24. They add up to -8. How about -6 and +4? Is that right? Now you got to set each factor equal to 0. You cannot set 3 equal to 0. That doesn't make sense. So in order to get rid of the 3, why don't we divide both sides by 3, so we won't get the impression we have 3 answers. We only have 2 answers. Okay, so in other words, this is exactly the same as x minus 6, x plus, what was it? 4 is equal to 0. You only have 2 factors. That's a constant. You cannot set constant equal to 0. 3 is not equal to 0. So if you set each of these guys equal to 0, you get either x is equal to 6 or is equal to -4. As we expected, once again, we have what? 2 answers. However, in the next example, you have x cubed. So expect to come up with what now? 3 answers, correct? Because the highest power of x in the equation is 3, not 2. So these are called cubic equations, polynomials of degree 3. Okay, move this guy over so you can put what? The equation in what? Standard form. Just subtract 18x from both sides. Now look for a common factor, which happens to be x. And that leaves you with, let's say, x squared minus 3x minus 18. Yes, you factored this trinomial, but it's not completely factored because this guy still breaks down. How? That would be like, give me two numbers, they multiply to -18, they add up to -3. So how about -6 plus what? 3? Okay, set this equal to 0. Now set each of these 3 factors equal to 0, like so, and get your 3 answers, one of which happens to be 0. The other guy is 6. The last one is -3. There you go. Box your 3 answers. Those are your final answers. As a matter of fact, these are called solutions of this equations. So you got 3 solutions. Do you see it? Once again, you have an equation, but this time it is in a standard form and the left side is factored form. So this is good to go. There is nothing for you to do. All you have to do is what? Set each of these factors equal to 0, but I cannot set 2 equal to 0, correct? The first thing I do, I divide both sides by 2, so I get x plus 1 times x minus 7 equals 0. So 2 does not contribute to your solutions. It just disappears when you divide both sides by 2. So do not go by setting 2 equal to 0. That doesn't make sense, right? 2 is not equal to 0, never. So set each of these guys equal to 0 and get your two answers, -1 and 7 box your answer. Notice 2 did not put any dent in my final answer. Do you see it? Sometimes you may have what? X minus 6 squared. What do we do here? Well, why don't we just multiply this guy through so we can remove the parentheses. So the first step is remove the parentheses. All right. That's the straightforward method to do. So when you do, you get x squared minus 12x plus 36 minus 4 equals 0. All right, what did I do? I did FOIL, foiled it. Okay, but now 36 minus 4 gives you x squared minus 2x plus 32 is equal to 0. This is a special trinomial. The equation is in standard form, so my next step is to factor out the left side. Notice the leading coefficient is 1, so I can guess the answers. What is it? Give me two numbers, they multiply to 32, but they add up to 12. How about 8 and 4? Let's see now, minus. Okay, because -8 minus 4 is -12. -8 times -4 is positive 32. Check the sign, make sure you got the correct signs. Set each of these guys equal to 0 and get your final two answers. How do I know I should get two answers? Notice the highest power of x was 2. Do you see it? So that indicates I have to come up with two answers, namely what? 8 and 4. And that should pretty much do it for this section. Thank you.